Do you think marriage is mainly important due to people having children, or do you think it's an important thing? Is it like the end game for most people, like if that don't want to be single?
I think that marriage, as far as an institution, like I was saying before, has been sort of debased, really, since the sexual revolution. I think that marriage has, and you can see this as well, by the way, and again, something I pointed out in my fourth book, Religion, is if you go back and you look at all of these, like if you look at the decline in marriage, it begins, the steep decline begins right around 1965. And if you look at the rise, the spike in divorces and then the drop off, that spike began right in 1965. And if you look at no fault divorce, 1970, I think. And you look at all of these increases and decreases, you can go trace it back to 1 year. And it was like 1965, 1966, and that is right when the sexual revolution happened as a result of hormonal birth control. So when we look at like the decline in marriage, as you were saying, why should marriage just be for having babies or whatever? I don't think, personally, if you're going to ask my opinion, then personally I'd say no, because I believe that men and women are innate and natural complements to one another. There is the conventional masculine and conventional feminine. So as I said before, I've been married for 25 years. My strengths as a positive, conventionally masculine male offset the weaknesses of my conventionally feminine wife, and vice versa. We are complements. We're innate, natural, evolved complements to one another. That's sexual dimorphism between human beings is a feature, not a bug. And we are not blank slates. We are not just equal partners in all of this. We're not just egalitarianism is a pipe dream. However, as I've said before, men and women are better together than they are apart. So how do we facilitate that? We're already seeing globally, particularly in Western industrialized nations right now, we're seeing that the fertility rate in those nations are below replacement level right now as a result of the last 60 years of what has happened since the sexual revolution. And so when we look at how women have been put into the workplace, we see the decline in religion, just like you guys were saying a minute ago. We look at the social changes of what many people have called gynocentrism, which means we are focusing primarily on the needs and the social order that is created by and for women at this point. So if you look at right now, if you look at the major financial institutions around the world, the IMF, the EMF, World Bank, you look at the United States, Janet Yellen, I think, is Secretary of Treasury. Most of the world's financial institutions are controlled by women. And we look at the power base right now is very focused on the female. While at the same time, socially, we're led to believe that we live in this horrible, oppressive, masculine patriarchy, and that masculinity is toxic. So the social narrative is men are still in control, men are still evil, men are still toxic, men are still this, that, or whatever. Well, at the same time, we're seeing data after data after data that's pointing completely in the opposite direction.
Yeah, and
so
I've heard you.
When we're talking about like marriage, I'm not against, as I said, I'm not against marriage. And I have a lot of people ask me that same question, Mark. They'll say, should I get married? I want to get married, Rollo, but, because I want to have kids, but I want to be able to, protect my assets or, not be overinvested in this because I still want to have, they would very much like to have really what I have. I don't use my marriage as an example very often because I don't want guys to think, oh, well, Rollo has the 12 steps to go get a perfect marriage. I don't have that. I mean, I know it works for me and I know it works for my wife. I can show you what that looks like, but that doesn't mean that my success is going to in any future indication of your success. So, but I can tell you like sort of the basics, like the success and the strength of my marriage is really based on sort of being red pill aware and understanding my nature as a man and her nature as a woman. And, are we religious? Do we have a faith? Yes, we do. Have we been married for a long time? Yes. Do we have that sort of, symbiotic, complementary marriage? Yes. We've done it quite successfully for a long time now. And my daughter is 23 and graduating from, she's getting her postgraduate work right now. So I think I've done pretty well according to, what I've been sort of espousing, I guess, for the last 20 years. But when we're talking about building families and we're talking about marriage, guys have to take that into consideration as to like, I am essentially building a house on land that I don't own and that I will never own. Because right now it is more advantageous for men to be out. They have more power, more maneuverability outside of marriage than they do inside of marriage. Because once they do get into that, then they're on the hook for debt load. They're on the hook for the kids. They're on the hook for for whatever. It's just this constant, like, you've got to constantly keep up with, working on the relationship and working on the marriage. And if you don't, there's always that sort of Damocles that's over your head that's saying, well, divorce is always on the table for her, but not for me. And so when it comes to like your ability to do more, to maneuver, to have more power in your life, men have more power outside of marriage than they do inside of marriage. And I'm not saying that that's the way it ought to be, and I'm not happy about that, but that's just simply those are the considerations that guys make when they're talking to me. So
you published The Rational Male, 2013, you said?
2013.
So that means you were already like more than 15 years of marriage in, right? But understanding all of those statistics, would you have, I can't even say would you have changed anything, but do you think, knowing what you know now as a young man, would you still have gotten married? Because you've had a successful marriage, you stayed faithful, but knowing what you know about dynamics, would you still have made the choice to get married to one woman at that point?
You're not the first one to ask me this. Yeah. I would probably have still gotten married, but okay. I probably would have waited a little bit longer.
What age did you get married?
I got married at 28. So
28. Why would you have waited?
I probably would have waited till about 30. People will criticize me for this too, because they're like, well, Rollo says don't even consider monogamy until you're 30, right? Well, yeah, because I didn't know what I was going to become, right? At 35, 36, right? I've told you guys before, is like, the really, when you're hitting your stride as a man, or the age at which you should be able to hit your peak potential, right around 35, 36 years old. Mm. And what I think more and more guys are experiencing right now is they're getting to that point and they're going, oh man, Rollo was right, because now I'm finally hitting my stride and I'm finally in the position of sexual selection that a woman of 23-year-old woman has been enjoying since that time, right? And now I'm at a point where I can make the decision on who I want to be with rather than who I get to be with, right? And tell who I have to settle for, who I want to be with. Mm. Now, I'm like, asking me this question is like a little bit, it's like biased or skewed a little bit, is because my background and what I did prior to getting, married with my wife, like, people want to say, well, Rollo doesn't know the game, or he hasn't been dating for a long time, so he can't really speak to this or that. But I have had a fairly unique set of circumstances for my life. Primarily because when I was growing up, I grew up in Southern California. I was in the Hollywood metal scene for a long time. I always say my rock star 20s. My notch count is right around 41 or 42 women. And my, right. Does that sound like a lot to you? By the way, does that sound like I'm a man whore by saying like
not with a ponytail? It doesn't.
Not with a ponytail, yeah, right. No, I mean, but because
it doesn't sound like you're a man whore. It doesn't.
Because there's guys like when I was on the Pat Campbell show, I once said that just because I'm just used to blurting it as public knowledge, right? Mm-hmm. Pat Campbell and his audience were like, "Oh my God," like they couldn't believe like that was my number. And then on the other hand, like if I'm talking to guys who are like quote unquote dating coaches or PUAs, that's like, those are rookie numbers.
Yeah.
Like they're like triple digits and they're like, man, that was my, last 3 months kind of thing. Right. At least that's what they would like you to believe. Uh-huh. But I know guys who have triple digits. I know women who have triple digits. So I always feel like either I like didn't get enough or I got too much depending on the audience that I'm talking to. But so, I mean, most of that was between the ages of, say, 17 and when I first got laid and where I'm at right now, right? So I lived through that. I lived through the sort of those years. My work experience has been primarily in two industries, and that has been gambling, like casino marketing, and promotions, like doing special events and promotions, and then wine and spirits. So I've worked in primarily liquor for a long time, like prior to 2020 when everything went to hell. It was primary. Like I've got ownership stake in a couple of liquor brands right now. They still get residuals from, but other than that, like when I was coming up, I had to be the guy who would go to martini fests and pick the booth candy to come along. I had to select very attractive women, and I had to be around the beautiful people all the time. And I think that a lot of my work and a lot of my observations came from sort of being a student of human behavior. So you're at these social events. I'm in clubs all the time. I'm at martini fest. I'm doing all these things. And I'm out at least, if not every weekend, every other weekend. And I'm the only one sober there because I got to work the event. So I'm watching what's going on in the interactions, and I'm sort of taking mental notes as I'm doing this. And then what happens the next day, I'll go on my blog, or I'll go on a forum or whatever. I'll just type out what I saw and sort of do these kind of field reports. And that's really how a lot of this came to be. And so I had that is sort of a unique experience. And then also I got involved with a woman right around my mid to late 20s who was borderline personality disorder. And so I've been through that. So I can speak to a lot of different things. I can speak to being single. I can speak to being, in charge of, having command presence and being the authority on, liquor shoots and stuff like that. I can speak to women who have borderline personality disorder and getting guys who are wrapped up in that still to this day. I can speak to how it is to be married. I can speak how it is to be, raise a daughter from infancy to 23 years old. And I have a real depth of experience when it comes to what it is that I write about. So would I have done anything different? That's kind of like saying, well, what would you tell your 18-year-old self? Crypto and hold. That's what I would tell my 18-year-old self. Buy a lot of Apple stock, right? I don't know. I always think that's kind of a ludicrous question, because then I wouldn't be the person that I am right now and learned from the mistakes that I had made. I think a lot of people read my work, or they're very complimentary to me, and they'll say, "Oh, Rollo, you got everything right." And I'm like, no. The reason why I'm able to write the way I do is because I got a lot of stuff wrong, and I corrected, and thank God I didn't make some really hectic mistakes that I probably could have made. So would I have gotten married? Yeah, I probably still would have gotten married. But remember, it was a different time back then too. So the idea, and remember, we didn't have social media. We didn't have all that. If I had the same data and the understanding of what things were going to be like, I think I would have looked at it in a different perspective. Mm-hmm. I think I probably, as I said, I would have probably waited a little bit longer to see, how things panned out. But again, I wouldn't be who I am right now if it hadn't been for 25 years of marriage. And I'm not saying, oh, my wife she's this, my strength and my rock. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that the experience that I had from 28 to 53 was integral to my work.